tavola rotonda. Comincio dunque col presentarmi, sono Alfonso Zardi, sono il responsabile delle attività intergovernative del Consiglio d'Europa in materia di democrazia locale e regionale e quindi sono il segretario di questo Comitato Europeo per la democrazia locale e regionale che co-organizza la riunione di oggi e di domani assieme all'ISIG. E in questa sala, come avete potuto notare, ci sono molti rappresentanti dei nostri Stati membri che siedono in tale veste proprio in questo Comitato Europeo. E sottolineo questo fatto perché un comitato di questo genere si riunisce abitualmente a Strasburgo, che è la sede della nostra organizzazione, e solo eccezionalmente si riunisce fuori sede. Questa occasione è parsa particolarmente fortunata ed opportuna per invitare appunto i nostri delegati a venire a Gorizia e domani a Nova Gorizia, proprio perché il tema lo giustificava, lo giustifica pienamente, ed è un tema sul quale il Comitato in quanto tale sta lavorando da parecchi anni. E l'obiettivo è per l'appunto quello di produrre delle risposte concrete basate sulla vostra esperienza, onde far progredire questa cooperazione, sopprimendo o riducendo gli ostacoli, che possono essere di diversa natura, dall'ostacolo giuridico, amministrativo, dalla legislazione diversa, dall'incompatibilità dei sistemi, all'ostacolo pratico, l'esistenza di una frontiera o l'assenza di una strada che bisogna eventualmente costruire, eccetera. Le soluzioni che abbiamo proposte sono già state nominate, i metodi di lavoro anche sono stati evocati. Ciò che avete ascoltato finora va appunto nel senso di mostrare qual è la varietà delle soluzioni che sono state trovate finora in termini di organismi di dialogo e coordinamento, in termini di strutture comuni che forniscono assistenza, consiglio, capacità progettuale agli enti locali, in termini di strutture giuridiche o di soluzioni di tipo giuridico, legislazioni comuni, ad esempio trattati bilaterali o trilaterali che permettono ai paesi limitrofi, ai paesi vicini o ai paesi partecipanti di avere la stessa soluzione per lo stesso problema. Tutto questo confluirà dunque nei lavori del nostro comitato e io ringrazio tutti i partecipanti proprio perché con la loro esperienza e con la loro testimonianza arricchiscono il nostro lavoro che speriamo è nel vostro interesse. Detto questo, io introduco la prossima tavola rotonda che è in due parti e che riprende per l'appunto le tematiche che ho evocato. Da un lato noi cominciamo con il dottor Del Bianco, che è il direttore dell'ISIG, per parlare di un progetto che è l'ultimo progetto del Consiglio d'Europa, proprio per aiutare all'identificazione degli ostacoli e all'identificazione e alla messa in pratica delle soluzioni per sormontare gli ostacoli, mediante l'elaborazione di un manuale. Il Benelux ne ha uno, che è certamente una fonte di ispirazione estremamente utile. Noi stiamo cercando di creare il nostro, ovviamente più ampio in termini geografici, forse non molto diverso in termini di contenuti. È ciò che ci dirà fra un attimo Daniele Del Bianco, seguito poi dalla signora Brion, che mi pare ci presenterà l'esperienza del FORST, di questo istituto di formazione, per la formazione dell'amministrazione pubblica, perché tutto ciò di cui stiamo parlando coinvolge in proporzioni variabili ma spesso considerate l'amministrazione pubblica. Se l'amministrazione non conosce, non sa, non è competente, non aiuta, evidentemente questo costituisce una difficoltà, un ostacolo. Quindi ascolteremo con molto interesse questa presentazione. Nella seconda parte esamineremo un altro aspetto del nostro lavoro, ma non voglio anticipare. Ho detto tutto questo in italiano anche per facilità, visto che sono italiano io stesso, ma rappresentando il Consiglio d'Europa ritengo doveroso usare le lingue ufficiali della mia organizzazione, che è quella nostra. I am therefore very pleased to give the floor to Dr. Daniele Del Bianco, Director of ISIG. ISIG is a long-standing partner of the Council of Europe in the field of cross-border cooperation, and he will introduce the topic of tools for cross-border cooperation, and in particular the manual to overcome obstacles on which the Council has been working for a few years now. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear guests, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, it would have been a pleasure and an honor to introduce you to this handbook, but after this morning session I realized that a lot of work needs to be done in order to include the valuable contribution that were offered today. So this is actually a draft version of the manual, which will be completed in a few weeks. And I will try to stress that I will not go into the single case studies that we collected through this manual and through the questionnaire that were distributed by the Council of Europe, but we will delve into the methodology that we try to develop with this manual in order to provide a platform for local authorities and stakeholders to share their experience about best practices, obstacles and solutions to cross-border cooperation. Where does the manual start from? This morning, recommendation 2005 on reducing obstacles from the Council of Europe was already recalled. Just to mention two main points, that the Council of Europe stirs for the generalization of good practices and the removal of obstacles in order to facilitate the ratification of the Madrid Convention and its protocols. This is a key point that was discussed yesterday during an informal meeting, parallel meeting to this conference with the IGCT of Gorizia, and today again during coffee breaks. The latest development of the Madrid Convention and the third protocol, they do offer valuable solution for local authorities and non-public stakeholders who want to approach formal established cooperation in established structure. And I think removing of obstacle and promoting the ratification of this protocol is an objective that should be pursued. Now, the removal of obstacle to transfrontier and interterritorial cooperation would also facilitate the preparation of new tools. And on these two lines, I think we have recalled the main aspects of the recommendation that stands before the preparation of this manual. Now, what's the starting point? In 2011, the Council of Europe, through the Committee of Experts on Local and Regional Government Institutional Cooperation, launched a survey which was composed of open questions, and 40 questionnaires were received through this consultation. To top up these questionnaires, another consultation was launched in May and July 2013, and in these 2 months, 27 questionnaires were received, implementing the database that we already had back at the end of 2011. We have 23 countries which responded to the questionnaire, spanning from Austria all the way down to Ukraine, following the alphabetical order of the questionnaires, and for a total of 38 agencies which actually compiled the questionnaire for each state. After screening the questionnaires, 286 CBC instances were recorded. So this manual, this handbook, collects almost 300 CBC instances throughout these countries, and 165 specific obstacles were recorded, therefore giving quite a vast array of different obstacles faced by local authorities throughout Europe when implementing cross-border actions. After screening these good practices or these instances and the obstacles, almost 60 good practices were recorded. And this data, they only refer to the 40 questionnaires received at the end of 2012, and they still need to be implemented by the online questionnaire. So we are planning to increase the number substantially by the end of the month, when we are expected to hand in the final version of the questionnaire, which will also take into account the contribution of today's meeting. Now, what are the objectives? This manual does not occur in a vacuum. All of us know that many different manual toolkit handbooks that are produced by the Council of Europe and other organizations on methods of cross-border cooperation. So what is the value added of this manual? Its main objective is to give a structured presentation of cross-border instances that local authorities believe themselves to be good practices, obstacles or solutions to cross-border cooperation, and to present them in a structured way so to allow for comparison and to allow for, so to say, static sharing of experiences throughout Council of Europe countries. Now, to put it in another way, the manual wants to help local authorities when they're asking questions such as the obstacle to develop CBC I face today might be similar to those other CBC actors have already faced and successfully overcome, how do I get to those obstacles? Learning about successful CBC instances will help me to develop new CBC activities or think differently about what I'm doing. And finally, to understand that if others face the same obstacle, then local authorities can network together to brainstorm new solutions. So the manual, in order to achieve these results, is divided in 3 sessions, each of them presenting the case studies and the instances I was referring before. In the first part of the manual, the assessment of CBC is underlined. It is important to have a common methodology to assess the CBC momentum a local authority is facing. Only through a sharing of the starting point we can develop a common solution, or we can look jointly at obstacles. Now, if we assess CBC properly, then we can get a better knowledge of the CBC area, and therefore the CBC action can become quicker and more targeted. But of course it is important to be also effective in uncovering obstacles, and therefore a clear identification of CBC problem is needed. Once stage 1 and stage 2 is reached, then we can delve into finding the solution in order to promote integrated projects and to promote the sharing of practices throughout Europe. Therefore, we are referring here about benchmarking CBC practices. Okay, the first session, it is an attempt to find a common methodology that local authorities can use in order to define the CBC practices they are actually currently developing. So we are looking here at 6 stages that is starting from setting the basis for cooperation. And we are providing a number of guiding questions for local authorities to understand where they are at. This manual, instead of providing answers, it really provides questions, because we felt that giving the correct guiding questions, then we can help local authorities to face the same outlook when looking at CBC initiatives. So, after setting the basis of cooperation, it is important to set the pace of cooperation and understand what are the phase CBC action are in, and to understand whether there is a long term for CBC. Then it is important to set the goals for cooperation, understanding if there is a clear cross-border problem, what are the goals and what are the opportunities, to understand and to make sure effects, core problems, and trends are not confused one with the other. Identifying actors, competencies, and legal provision is then key when we want to look at the CBC structure that local authorities often refer to in the development of CBC activities. And finally, identifying the areas of CBC in order to refer to a European framework when looking at CBC actions. First step then is identifying a CBC problem. As we said before, the manual tries to link all the different CBC instances by posing guiding questions. And the first problem, whenever we look at a project we want to undertake, is to clearly define the core problem we want to tackle. Therefore, we propose guiding questions such as, is the problem at hand requiring immediate action? What is the immediate action that should be achieved? And to who it is a priority? Is something already be done? By whom? How? Let's not forget that many times private stakeholders and civil society stakeholders are approaching cross-border problems from a long time before local authorities realize there is a problem, and therefore they can provide proper solution and proper insight to that problem-solving mechanism. Then it is necessary to identify the causes. Why did the problem arise now? Where does it come from? What is it causing it? Does he have only an internal dimension? Does he have an external dimension? And that's something we'll learn more in detail later on with the presentation of Professor Gasparini presenting the SWOT variables determining cross-border cooperation. And then, of course, we have to look at the effects. Who is most affected by the problem? How much it is affected? What would happen if no solution is found, etc. Now, when trying to find a common answer to this problem, it is important always to look and refer back to SMART indicators, so to ensure that the answer we provide is actually a proper and specific answer to the problem at hand. Very often, a cause is mistaken for an effect, whereas if we use smart indicators, then it's easier to ensure that the solution offered or the answer provided, they actually refer to the question. It is important also that CBC action are in line with the process that CBC, the cross-border area, is facing, and therefore that is in line with the pace of CBC. So to make sure that, for instance, CBC structure, they are not a new burden for the cooperation, but they're actually a viable answer for the problem faced. Now, if we look at the self-reinforcing coherent CBC action mechanism, then starting with the promotion of mutual knowledge, of course, more often than not, local authorities seek to enable economy of scale in order to provide better services. Providing better services means, for instance, overcoming the free rider problem. Let's think, for instance, at transport or health insurances or healthcare or emergency care. Freeing resources will then enable a better management of infrastructure that will provide a better overall cohesion and visibility of the territory, and only then the territory will be in a better position and a better shape in order to attract funds. That is a very important mechanism, very important process to take into consideration. So to make sure that cross-border cooperation is not mistaken for a fund-making, money-making activity. Once we have identified the pace of CBC action, then we are also looking for the actors. And it is very important to have clearly in mind who does what in the CBC context. A problem that is often referred to when looking at the obstacle and examples of CBC collected through the manual is the problem of the legal framework. Do we have a legal framework to cooperate? Do we have a legal framework in which we can expand our CBC action? This manual tries to provide logical schemes to be followed in order to identify the proper legal frameworks upon which CBC can be initiated. And here again, we have a number of guiding questions that will help us in the local authorities to find the solutions. More often than not, when talking with local authorities, there is a problem posed on which is the proper legal setting and the proper CBC structure within which we should operate in order to promote our CBC action. Through different manuals developed in the past, we identified 4 different types of management structure of CBC, and here again we have a conceptual map in order to ensure that the right structure is selected. The manual then identifies 8 different areas of CBC. For each area, examples are provided, and for each area, specific sectors are identified. I'm going to go quickly through the methodology for identification of obstacle, but once again, when we divided the main 4 dimensions of obstacle into stakeholder dimension, social cultural dimension, economic dimension, and institutional dimension, we have a number of questions, so to guide local authorities to select those obstacles they are facing and how relevant they are to experience facing their territory. And here we have 5 different sectors of obstacles. For each of them is complemented by a number of examples. Each of them is complemented of a number of examples for each specific sector of CBC on the reason why obstacles they persist, on the obstacle that should be removed by the action of local authorities and regional authorities alone, by the action of the coordinated action of local and national authorities, and by international cooperation. Done that, we are looking at the solution. Once again, the vast array of examples and of obstacles and solutions we were confronted of needed to be structured. And the manual is trying to do that, because we believe that beside giving a long list of solutions, it was important to identify and to take by the end local authorities in order to see how the solution could be relevant to their initiative. Now, what is the way ahead? And by this I will conclude my presentation. We think that this static that this static manual would be more useful if it will be turned into a dynamic platform that will enable for the quick consultation of local authorities of obstacles and solutions faced by their counterparts throughout Europe. Now, in our idea is to create an online database that could be filled by questionnaire gathered every 3 months and distributed to all local authorities, by which we can select the area in which we want to have answers, for instance transport, the sector in which we can work, for instance integrated ticketing, and then we can look at obstacles. For instance, national legislation, as it was reported in one example, makes no distinction between international and cross-border public transport. That means that international transport, it can follow the rules of it's based on a commercial basis, whereas local transport is often linked to subsidies. And now this, of course, implies clear obstacles when we want to develop a cross-border transportation system. So what are the solutions? We can offer a vast array of solutions. These are just a few that are contained in the manual. For instance, coordinated timetabling, as it is in the case on the German-Polish border. Or, for instance, special offers and recognition of fares. Or the introduction of new infrastructure that can actually cover that problem. Or, for instance, just the creation of a transport guide, ensuring that citizens on both sides of the border can reach all the information needed in order to use this transportation system. And then, of course, we offer more advanced and integrated best practices, such as better reported on the German-Danish border, where we have the Danish Transport Authority and the federal state that are working together in order to provide a cross-border transport service. In this case, the Danish authority has a contract to the operator and operates that contract on behalf of the federal state. That way, there is a common bus system, a common transportation system, and there is an agreement between the two authorities on who should pay for it. Therefore, free rider problem is, so to speak, reduced. So this is the idea of how to get forward. It was a very quick overview, but the manual presents all this vast array of examples that should be available to all local authorities to expand and to build on to initiate more CBC activities. Thank you very much.